Hi, I am Mimi Lichtenstein, and I am excited to be here today to talk about Antarctica. I happen to be in South Carolina at the beach right now, so it's warm and sunny outside. I'm looking forward to the next few minutes talking with my guest today about a place very, very cold at the bottom of this earth. I have Lesa Bain and Jen Martin here from National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions, and they're going to give us a little bit of an overview of what that relationship is. So I just wanted to allow you guys both to introduce yourselves. Lesa, do you want to start?
Yeah, hey, my name is Lesa Bain. I'm VP of Sales for Lindblad Expeditions, and I've been with Lindblad now for about, going close to 9 years. Have traveled to all 7 continents, love the fact that we really focus on the sustainability of travel, and I'm very honored to get the chance to work with people like Jen Martin, who helps us to get to these remarkable places around the planet.
And I'm Jen. I started 13 years ago with Lindblad, and I came in having worked on ships for many years and came in as expedition staff, expedition leader, and a naturalist, and traveled all over the world. And now I manage itinerary development for Lindblad as well as our expedition staff, our field staff.
Great. Well, I'm happy to have you both here. I'm excited, actually, in a few minutes, we'll talk about some of the different itineraries. A lot of people think when you're going to Antarctica, it's just sort of you go to Antarctica, but there's a few different add-ons that I think would be really interesting for those who have an extra few days to stay down there. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it feels like to go on an Antarctica expedition, because it's definitely not your average cruise. It's I wouldn't even say it's your average expedition trip. So we're going to get a little insight about that, and then talk about the seasonality, because the season's very short, and the beginning of the season to the end of the season actually is quite different of an experience when you're down there. We'll talk about some itinerary options and the types of ships that you guys go on and how those compare to some of the other ships that are down there. And my favorite topic, lots of the adventures and experiences you can have while you're there, including the Polar Plunge, which when I go to Antarctica, I'm for sure going to partake in. And then we'll get a little bit of an idea about what the price point is to go down there, and some helpful hints from you two, because you guys have been there more than I have. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Maybe, Jen, would you want to give us a little bit of an idea, because I've just learned that you've been down there at least 12 times, which is amazing. What is it like to be on a trip going to Antarctica?
Antarctica is one of the most interesting places I have ever been. There's no place like it. You know, I think our idea is usually to compare one place to another, and I don't think you can really find a comparison for it, because it's this combination of ice and rock and penguins. There's no vegetation. There isn't a lot of color difference, but in and amongst that, it is so beautiful, and it's so alive. And you know, it's partly the lighting that you see, and partly the diversity of the wildlife, and the fact that it's right in front of you. And I think most people leave Antarctica loving something that they never expected to love, and I don't think anyone ever has a mediocre response. We all deeply love the place, and everybody comes back and says, oh, you know, it's amazing, it's incredible for so many reasons.
Well, it's interesting, because similar when people go on a safari, they come back and everybody feels, I think, very impacted by the experience. And I imagine, obviously, yours is similar, but in a completely different environment. The other day when we were talking, you mentioned, too, about the silence of being there, that it's just such a very, very quiet, peaceful place. Do you want to give us a little insight into what is it like if you're out on the deck of one of your ships?
There is a lot of silence. I would say the one exception to that is the penguin colonies, and I'll get to that in a second. But for the most part, you don't really find places like that where you're not seeing or hearing airplanes fly overhead, ever. You are not seeing or hearing other ships, even though they're there. We're all sort of moving out of one another's way. You don't hear cars. There's no ambient noise at all other than nature. You might hear ice cracking. If you go into a penguin colony, it is raucous and very loud, and it's all the penguins yelling at each other for space. But for the most part, you walk away from that and it is silent, and it's a nice reminder of that. And it's something that I think people don't anticipate until they get there and they start to realize that things like that are the added benefits that you're not expecting.
Yeah, and we can all use some silence, I think. Yes. Lesa, I'm going to add your pictures to our stream, and maybe do you want to pull up, I think you had a map or the bottom of the globe, perhaps?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So tell us, Jen, a little bit about, I think I see the tip where Ushuaia, Argentina is over there in the top left corner. Is that right?
Yes. So what you're seeing is the entire continent, and you're looking from the bottom of the earth straight down at the South Pole. And so that little tail that sticks up kind of to the top left corner is the Antarctic Peninsula. And just across from it, you can just make out the bottom of southern South America. And that's where the town of Ushuaia is positioned. And that is what we use and many companies use as a gateway to get to the Antarctic Peninsula. That's really the place where most people are visiting.
And it's so interesting. So you can't see the tip of South Africa.
No, it's much further. And honestly, it's such a large ocean that surrounds it that the smallest distance that you would traverse to get from one continent to Antarctica would be South America and the Drake Passage. And you can see that pictured here. It's really the shortest distance from any large landmass is crossing that.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's jump in. I'm going to ask you about seasonality, but first tell me about the Drake Passage, because what I understand is that used to be the only way you could go, but more recently there are companies that will fly you over the Drake Passage so you don't have to traverse it on the ship. What's your opinion about the Drake Passage or skipping the Drake Passage, and how long does it take to cross it, and what is it really like?
I think it's a necessary part of the experience, and Lisa, I'm sure, will add on to that as well, but for a couple of different reasons. The first thing is you can fly, but if you think about the conditions of the weather down on the Antarctic Peninsula, it's often foggy, it's often windy, it's often snowy, and flights are not, you can't depend on them all the time. It's a very difficult thing to schedule and to plan on each time. But in addition, it's part of the experience to cross the Drake Passage and get over to the Southern Ocean and get to the Antarctic Peninsula. It's part of really seeing what makes it so special. And Antarctica is a very vibrant place. It has a tremendous amount of wildlife, and all of that is due to the rich ecology of the ocean surrounding it. So crossing that ocean, being a part of that experience, you can see when you cross into what is considered biological Antarctica. The weather changes, the water's colder, you see different seabirds, you see different marine mammals. It is a really important part of it. And I know that there's a fear of the conditions crossing the Drake Passage, and it can be rough and it can be calm. I have seen it both ways. And there's no predicting that. There's no way to say, if you go at this time of year, it's better than this time of year. And I wouldn't even bother with that. I think it's what you experience, it's what you do to get to the majesty of Antarctica. And I'm sure Lisa would add on to that.
Yeah, look, I will say, one of the things I think we realize in travel that is so important is the anticipation of arrival, right? That building up of excitement as you approach a trip, but as you get into a trip. So when you get on the ship and you head out of the Beagle Channel and you are straight into that amazing Drake Passage, from the very moment there's this building of excitement. You see that first iceberg. You see one that's a little larger. Then you see something the size of a building. Then you see that first penguin. So it's just this continuous build of excitement and anticipation until you arrive and see these mountains just come up out of the ocean. And I think I kind of equate it to going to Africa. So I'm so glad you brought that up. You would not go to Africa and want to see the big five in one paddock and go, got done it, seen it. You want to go out in the morning on your safari and, oh my gosh, is that a lion over there? That anticipation of seeing it. It's the same with Antarctica. And that Drake Passage is just such a beautiful way of arrival into the place. And look, the ships are built specifically for that travel across the Drake Passage. So you're on ships that are built to withstand anything. But as Jen said, it can be the Drake Lake or the Drake Shake. And there are times where it's so flat you can skip a stone on it. So but it's a remarkable experience to arrive into Antarctica.
Well, it kind of even reminds me, I know it's completely different, but going to Everest. I mean, you could get dropped off at the top of Everest, but that's not the point, right? You got to go through, you got to earn your stripes by going, up the mountain. And this is a little different because you are on a very well-appointed ship, but still, you got to get across it. That, thank you for sharing it. So I think for me, I'm definitely going to be doing the Drake Passage when I come. So I figured that. And then what about the length? Sort of what's the shortest length trip to go see Antarctica? And then I know you guys have a couple itineraries where you add on a couple other Oh, that looks fun. So making snow angels is one of the activities where you add on a couple other stops. Can you give us an idea of what kind of the minimum to the maximum type trip is?
Lisa, do you want to take this one or would you like me to?
Yeah, so I can touch on this one too. So we have our 14-day itinerary, which is the one that you fly down either into Buenos Aires or Santiago. We then fly you all together down into Ushuaia where we join our ship. And that is a 14-day from the day you leave home to the day you come back. We then have a really remarkable itinerary that takes you all the way from not just the peninsula, the peninsula, South Georgia, and the Falklands, right? So you've got these stunning islands over in South Georgia, which are a completely different experience, like the Serengeti of the Southern Ocean. And then we have this epic itinerary, which takes you all the way from from Ushuaia down to the peninsula, the west coast of Antarctica, the Ross Ice Shelf, up through the sub-Antarctic islands below New Zealand, which is similarly located to South Georgia, but have a different array of penguin species. So you've got the royal penguin, you've got the snares, well, the yellow-eyed penguin, and the king penguins and the elephant seals. But that's a 36-day epic expedition. And so that's really the granddaddy of them all, of seeing Antarctica. And then there are other trips that include Patagonia. So there's lots of options on how to explore this region.
Okay. And I want to show one of my favorite animals, which I think you have to go on one of these to go see, right? The elephant seals. Those are in where? South Georgia or the Falklands?
And the Falklands, both South Georgia and the Falklands, yes. You can occasionally see them in the South Shetland Islands off of Antarctica. That's sort of the archipelago that's just over the top of the peninsula, very close by. And we visit it often, but you won't see them in the numbers that you do in South Georgia and in the Falklands.
I can't imagine that they are very quiet creatures.
They're never quiet. They're never motionless for more than a few minutes at a time. They're always sort of shuffling around and snorting. And they weigh between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds. They're the largest pinniped or seal creature on the planet, the southern elephant seal.
And just out of curiosity, would you ever go on the beach near one of these, or they're too dangerous?
Yes, you could absolutely go near them. What you need to watch out for is when they decide they're going to move. If they're on the beach and they're headed back to the water, they're not stopping for anything. So our guests walk around them, and we keep a distance from all wildlife at all times, but we walk around them and we just tell everybody, don't stop looking. You have to pay attention because they're going to go where they're going to go.
Okay. Is there like a rush hour where they all decide to go at once?
No, they are very single-minded. They do whatever they want, whenever they want. And they do spend a lot of time wallowing in mud pools and in really disgusting bodies of water. That's one of their favorite things. But they'll go into and out of the sea anytime they're ready.
Okay, got it. Well, I can't wait to see one of those because as ugly as they are, they're super cute as well.
Oh, the babies are so cute. The little baby elephant seals are gorgeous.
Actually, that brings up, we sort of skipped over the seasonality. Let's talk about that for a bit, because I know that has an impact perhaps on different types of animals you see, and or maybe some babies, as well as weather and certain activities that can only happen at certain times. So would you touch on that? What is the season, and how does the beginning compare to the end? And if the middle is different, that too.
Sure. So it's a little different. I'll start just briefly tell you about the peninsula and then just touch on South Georgia and the Falklands because they are different. Okay. The season for all of this is really November through late February, early March. That is summertime in the Southern Ocean, and that is when things are happening. So on the Antarctic Peninsula, when you get there in November, you have very snowy conditions, heavy snowpack, and penguins that are just starting to come back from the sea to build their nests for the nesting season. So there's a lot of activity happening. There's a lot of noise. They're reconvening with their mates. They're building a nest. And as you get into December, they're laying their eggs. And into January, the chicks start to hatch. And into February, they're fledging the chicks, and the chicks are much bigger, and the adults have gone. And there's much less snow. There's a lot more mud and guano. It's quite different in that regard. With seals and whales, you can have seals year-round. Any species of the seal that you find down there, you could find it year-round. The whale species, you will find killer whales and minke whales usually year-round. But humpback whales will come down, and they are more prevalent, say, late November through February. They're a little bit later, but not by much. You can find humpbacks pretty much any time you go there. And then if you consider South Georgia and the Falklands, they are sub-Antarctic. They actually have vegetation on them. So they are much more seasonal when it comes to the seal populations as well. They will have the elephant seals coming very early season, which is October, November. And the adults will come and go as you get later into the year, but the young ones are gone after about November, December. You find that the penguin species there, the king penguins, they are breeding year round. They are year-round breeders. So any time of year you go there, you can find hundreds of thousands of king penguins, and it will be a mixture of adults and chicks together any time of year. It's much less seasonal in that regard. And with that particular species, you have the whales coming as well. Now, this is an emperor, and with the emperors, it's very seasonal for them. They are winter breeders. So they're breeding in the Antarctic winter. And by the time we get there, the colonies have mostly gone apart, but they're also breeding on sea ice. So they're much harder to get to see any sort of a colony there. But we do occasionally see independent emperor penguins, sometimes on their own on the ice once they've left the colony, or sub-adults that are on their own.
Okay. And so is there, for somebody who is mostly, obviously the wildlife you just described is throughout that season, but if someone's mostly interested in wildlife or loves wildlife, would you say, like, is there a sweet spot of a couple of weeks to go?
Anytime you go, you will be blown away if you love wildlife. Anytime. It's not even just a line. It is the absolute truth. There is so much food there, and there is so much abundance that it doesn't matter what time of year you go. You'd be more than blown away.
Okay, awesome. And then what about, we'll touch on experiences in a little bit, but I think when Lisa and I were talking the other day, at the beginning of the season, you can go snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, right? Because of the conditions of the snowpack and all that.
Yes.
Okay.
And so because you're skiing on the frozen ocean. It's where the sea ice has frozen. So it just has to be the right conditions and safe conditions, and then we can make it happen. And that does only happen if it's going to happen early season.
Season. We actually have a great photo of that, Mimi, if you want to share the screen. So that's it's a really remarkable experience. But yeah, we want to make sure that it's nice and sturdy and that you stay on top of the ice.
For sure. And so would you say early season, would that take you into Christmas time, or is that already past early season?
November is when this would happen. Early November is our best chance for this activity. Okay. And we can sometimes get into the fast ice. This is called fast ice. You can sometimes get into that in early December, but it would be something we'd be much more cautious about offering an activity like this as you get into December.
Okay. Good to know. And then this one has a picture of one of your ships in it. Tell us a little bit about, I know you guys have 3 boats that you bring down there. 2 of them are similar, and then one's a little different. But then how those, I love that picture, how those compare with some of the other ships that are bigger that go down there. Why is the size of your ship so important?
Lisa, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, so yes, certainly. So we have 2 brand new ships, the National Geographic Endurance, which launched last year, and the Resolution, which will launch this year. And those are 69 staterooms. 69 staterooms. I mean, it is all about the intimacy of scale. So that's 126 guests. And then our biggest ship that we actually have across the Lindblad fleet is the National Geographic Explorer, which is 148 guests. So it really comes down to the size, right? So Antarctica and Peninsula has a rule through the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators that you cannot have more than 100 people on the ice at one time. So that means that if you're on a larger ship, you have to wait until 100 people go and they come back. The beauty of our experience from being the first company down there in 66 and having explored for so many years is we know how to take all 126 or 148 guests off the ship, have people on the ice and other people engaged in kayaking or Zodiac safaris, so that you are really taking that time that you have, those opportunities, and making the very most of them. We really look at it as the luxury of access, right? You are in Antarctica to be in Antarctica, not sitting on the ship. So for us, it's these amazing teams like Jen and her teams and our captains that make the most of every possible moment to ensure our guests are off and exploring. So for us, the big difference against nearly anyone else that's down there is that intimacy of scale. It's having the underwater dive team that is sharing that marine biodiversity beneath our ships. It's having the experience with our ice captains and our photography program. So it really is about that community of like-minded travelers down there together experiencing these remarkable places.
Yeah, and I know obviously we all know National Geographic. I don't know about you guys, but I've been reading that probably since I was 5 years old. And their amazing photography and the access that you have to photographers on board and to equipment. And to be down there and have such a rich, deep knowledge to, pull from the staff that are on board. I mean, I definitely think in general for all of your different expedition cruises, that sets you guys apart from everybody else.
I mean, those guys are remarkable to have a National Geographic photographer at your beck and call. And their job is to help our guests get the most remarkable images of their lives. I mean, it comes down to, you're photographing penguins on white ice. So little white and black penguins on lots of white ice, lots of reflective light. It's helping you get your camera settings right. It's helping you get down on the ice and get really cute photos that you wouldn't think of taking. But it's also understanding cell phone technology has advanced so much in the last few years that you can photograph a lot of what we do now on one of these guys. So those photography classes run the gamut from cell phone to expensive SLRs. And then we have a B&H photo locker on the ships. So if you're a really heavy photographer, you might be able to go and check out free of charge, complimentary, a professional 100mm lens or a mirrorless camera body. So there's all this great equipment that you can play with when you're down in Antarctica as well.
And for the right person, that's like a kid in a candy store, right?
Yeah, very much so.
And what about your staff, as we just talked about, set you guys apart? Also, the sustainability piece of what you do and, the leave no trace. I think that you having such small boats, has many reasons, one of which is the experience, but also it has a very, as little impact as you possibly can. Can you give us a little bit of insights into what are some of the sustainability and environmental programs and processes that you guys do?
Yeah, so we have had sustainability at the very core of who Lindblad is since its inception. We are a carbon neutral company. We have no single-use plastics on our ships. We have even, and Jen can probably talk to this a bit more, but even on our expeditionary jackets for Antarctica, little things like having Velcro removed. Everyone thinks Velcro is great. It fastens your jacket. It's fantastic. But when you're going from island to island, Velcro is very good at picking up seeds or things that you don't want on the next island. So we actually redid our jackets to remove Velcro, so that's not an issue. So it's looking at every possible opportunity to limit transference, to ensure we care for these places and that we leave them in a better condition than what we find them, and that we educate our guests so they come back and want to help us protect them.
And I would imagine a lot of people come back from an Antarctica trip, and whether they were believers in climate change before or not, that it probably it either takes them where they are and amps them up a notch, or maybe takes someone who wasn't as on the believing scale and brings them along, I guess I would say, to being more, careful and thoughtful about our impact.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. I mean, we have all spectrums of green on the ships. I think, Jen, you'd agree with that. We have light green to dark green that travel with us. And they all have their questions on, the effect of having a ship down there. And Sven wrote a wonderful piece about over-tourism and under-tourism. And the whole reason Lindblad started in the first place was if we don't shine a lot of light on these places and educate people, then they don't have a voice, right? We have to give these places a voice so they will be protected. And so by being there and doing it in a sustainable fashion and caring for it, we're actually helping people understand it and preserve it for future generations. But you certainly do see people's eyes open up to the effect that if you throw a bottle in the river here in Nashville, Tennessee, over a certain amount of time, once it reaches that ocean, those tides are going to drag that bottle from here to Antarctica, to the Arctic, and it's just going to keep going. So, the little things we do here affect what happens in all of these places that we visit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for anyone who has kids, who are of age, that this would be meaningful to them would be such an amazing way to get kids at a young age to care about our climates and the impact of something in Nashville affecting the polar regions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't think it, but it does.
And then curious about myths. can you dispel some myths about going to Antarctica for me? One of them, which we talked about earlier, was the time it takes to get there. I think a lot of us feel like it's the most remote place there is, but it's actually closer or easier to, maybe easier might not be the right word. It's less time to get at least to Ushuaia than it is to go to Australia or on a safari. Yeah.
Yes, I think South America is a big continent. However, you're breaking up the travel because you're stopping in Buenos Aires and Santiago, and that flight from the US isn't that far. And then you have a short charter flight from one of those two cities down to Ushuaia. You are still crossing the Drake Passage, so it's 1.5 days on the way down, potential of 2 days coming back. But all of that is done over a slow process, and you have food and drink and comfortable beds and naturalist staff that are providing entertainment and information to you throughout the whole time. So I think it's easier than being in a coach flight to South Africa.
Very much so. I will tell you, Mimi, one of the most fun things to do when you are on the ship, once you know that people are going to do this, we do stretch classes every morning that are available to guests if they want to get up. And watching people on the back deck is like watching a whole Tai Chi class as they're all out there, because they're going with the waves and they're doing their stretches, or even the photographers. It's just this way that they're all moving together. But that Drake Passage crossing it's the opportunity to get to know your fellow travelers. It's learning your camera settings. It's understanding how we react around wildlife so we don't waste time when we're down there, right? You don't want to be having lectures on here's how we deal with penguins when you want to be out with the penguins. So that time is used so wisely to get over, go through all of those important factors and the history of the region. I mean, it's amazing how you're there and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, that wasn't any time at all.
Went by so fast. And what about the temperature? What's sort of the range of temperature, daytime and nighttime, perhaps, during the high season?
I would say that if you compare it to something like Colorado or Utah in the wintertime, if you're going on a ski holiday, it's very much like that because it's extremely dry. So you're probably looking at temperatures commonly between 30 degrees Fahrenheit and maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a pretty average day, but very, very dry. Where that changes is that it's windy. That's just a commonality of being down in Antarctica. There's always going to be some wind. So you do get a little bit of a temperature drop because of that. I have been there, though, on days where it's over 50 degrees and you're wearing a ton of sunscreen just to be sure you don't get burned. And I've been there on days when it's in the 20s. But if you look at 30 to 40, I would say that that's about average.
Okay. Well, I'm writing down sunscreen as something to bring with you.
Sunscreen, absolutely, because you're also in the place where you don't have as much of the ozone layer. So you can get burned very, very, very easily down there.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that never would have occurred to me.
Also, lip block that is high in SPF because you need it every single day.
All right. Good to know. And then I know another one is for people, I think, for going on expedition cruises or cruises in general, is how can I be active on and off the ship? We talked a little bit about snowshoeing and cross-country skiing early in the season. What about hiking? I know there's a little bit of a difference between the Antarctic Peninsula and some of your other stops that you make. How much hiking do you do on one of these trips?
If you're on the Antarctic Peninsula, you might do what would be considered a true hike. You might do one, maybe two of those, but every day there is walking available, and it might be that you're climbing up to see a penguin colony and you're climbing back down. So you are active, but it's not a one-way destination hike, mostly because of the topography. It's very, very steep there. South Georgia and the Falklands, there are some multi-hour hikes that are anywhere between 5 and 15 miles in some cases. And in that situation, you're looking at true hiking on maybe 3 or 4 different occasions as offered. But again, even if you're not doing a hike, there is activity. So you're not just standing around everywhere you go. Okay.
And then what about on the ship? You guys have a gym. Do you have a Peloton? Are there Pelotons on the ship?
There are not Pelotons, but you have a full yoga studio, you have a full gym, you have a wet and dry sauna, you have on the new ships there are 2 infinity hot tubs on the back deck. You certainly have all the workout equipment that you could possibly want. I'll tell you what we all laugh about when we're on the ships is the first few days the gym is uber busy. By about the 3rd or 4th day, it's kind of a couple of hardcore folks that are in there. Everyone else is like, oh, I'm getting enough exercise doing all the stuff I want to do. So But certainly on all of our ships, wellness is a large part of what we offer.
Okay. Well, I think for people who are, want to go see Antarctica, but also would like to have some comforts of home and some luxuries, it's nice that you guys have those appointments on your trips for sure. Some of the
kayaking as well. Kayaking is a big thing that we offer most days.
Yeah.
And is that so? Kayaking probably runs the full season.
Yes, the full season. Every time we can offer it when we have conditions that allow for it, we will have kayaks out.
Okay, that's
And
beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, it's not an additional cost. The kayaking is included as along with the cross-country skiing if we offer it, or the snowshoeing. That's all a part of the experience.
Okay, great. So is this a sunrise or a sunset, or maybe they look very similar?
This is a sunset, and one of the things to know about Antarctica is because you're so far south, sunsets like this can sometimes last 3 to 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
You have really beautiful light, and that's one of the things that is a takeaway from Antarctica that I think many people don't expect, is that the lighting is extraordinary. It's not like anything else you've ever seen. The light and shadows, because there's so much snow, there's so much reflective quality that you have beautiful lighting even middle of the day. And then evenings like this, it's extraordinary because you have these long periods of daylight that the sunsets can last a long time.
Well, I have teenagers who like Instagram, and so they're always seeking out the golden hour when we go places. So for that, it would be dreamy because it would be like the golden 3 or 4 hours.
Yes,
exactly.
And then what about, I love this. So your photography program, you touched on that a little bit. You obviously have these amazing photographers on board to teach newbies like me versus people who are skilled and bring their own equipment. I imagine there's something for them to learn no matter what. And clearly you're taking some very close-up shots, it looks like.
Well, yeah, we try not to do those very often. I know that was one of those instances, I think, where that's a baby elephant seal, right, Jen? So that little guy wanted to come over and say hello. So that's kind of like slobber on a lens right there. But,
right. You're probably not going to be using that again, at least.
Exactly. And we are really careful about keeping distance from wildlife. And in this case, it's true. This is Flip Nicklin, one of the National Geographic photographers. More than likely, he was on the beach photographing low. And these baby elephant seals, they've been weaned from their mothers, and they're looking for anybody to feed them. So they will come right up to people, and you just kind of have to hold your hands up and let them do what they're going to do and wait till they go away. They're adorable, but they are all in your business.
So cute. And do the elephant seals, is it just the males that have that enormous nose, by the way, or do both the females? Okay.
No, it's just the males.
Okay. And what about, you have an underwater diver, right? Who goes, we have to talk about this in a second too, but the underwater diver, does that person go in under the water and they're down there taking pictures of what's underneath you, and then they bring them back up and share them with the guests?
They're taking high definition video footage. So I think you had a slide up earlier that showed one of the divers under the water, but they're doing high definition video. And the only reason they're there is to bring that back to the guests and educate people. They're not there collecting for science. They're not doing any of that. They're there because that's the piece of Antarctica we can't show you in person. Mm-hmm. And it's such a rich environment. There is so much to it that they're bringing that back and showing that video in the recap that we have in the evenings in our lounge. And in addition, they have an ROV, a remote operated vehicle that they can actually pilot and take down to deeper depths, places where they can't dive themselves. But there is so much underneath the ice and underneath the surface of the water. It's something that we would not be doing our jobs as naturalists if we didn't share that piece of it.
Yeah, well, that's great. And you don't have to get really cold and do it yourself. So that's
exactly.
Good. Okay, so the Polar Plunge, which I mentioned at the beginning, I can't say that I want to do this, but I feel like it's a rite of passage. What do you think? What % of people who go on a cruise actually do this?
If we have a ship full, say we take National Geographic Explorer, 148 people, you might get 50 or 60 that do this. So maybe 1/3. It is definitely not for everybody. When I did the Polar Plunge, my father was on board with me, and I said, "Aren't you going to do this?" And he said, "Nothing makes me want to do this ever." He said, "But I'll cheer you on." And I think that's pretty common, that you might have one member of the party that wants to do it and another who says absolutely not. So it is very, very cold, but it's totally worth it in the end.
Well, and what's fun is once you're done and the ship is leaving and everyone's back on board, that's when all the folks who didn't do it go, "Oh, I wish I'd done that," or "I could have done that." It's like, yeah, sure.
And so when you get out of the water after having done it, I imagine you're wrapped in a blanket, but I assume you can't just go dip yourself in the hot tub. Like it's too drastic of a temperature change. Like what do people do to warm up?
No, I don't know. We ran straight to the hot tub.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. Well, all right. That's what I'm going to do then.
Well, there's always a nice glass of scotch or something as well. So you get out, you're given a towel, you knock back a nice little aperitif kind of post plunge. And then, we've got, particularly on the Explorer, you have that wonderful sauna, and that's a great place to go up to the sauna and sit in there. And everyone who's done it's an amazing camaraderie amongst that group who do the polar plunge. It's kind of like, oh, you're a polar plunger. It's an amazing experience. And it's one of those things I say to people, you may never pass this way again. And how often do we say to ourselves, I wish I'd done that. So when you go, you really, if you're even thinking about it, do it, because you'll regret it if you don't.
So that's the perfect quote, right? You regret the things in life you didn't do more than the things you did. So It's a good example. And I'll say, so I live in New Hampshire on the border of Vermont, and we happen to have friends who I think through the engineering program at Thayer, some students made them a sauna, kind of a self-contained sauna, and they have it next to a river in Vermont. And so I have been there on occasion in the middle of winter where we go from the sauna, go jump into the river, and then come back. So I might be somewhat conditioned to it already. I think you're
ready.
I think you're good.
Because New Hampshire winters are much colder than Antarctica summers. Much.
Oh, that's a very good point. It's practically warm. Yeah. And actually, if you're going in December, it's not like sometimes when the summertime, when you go somewhere cold to go skiing, it feels a little bit like, for me, living in a place where I've limited summer, like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to give up some of my heat for cold? Whereas I'm just giving up cold for actually not as cold. So it's an easier, okay, that's good to know. Give us an idea about price points, if you would, for the different types of cruises. I know, if you go on a big ship, typically it's going to cost a little bit less per person, or maybe a lot less per person. When people travel with you guys on one of these smaller ships, what's kind of the range of pricing?
Yeah, I think if you look at it more from a per person per day is the better way to look at it, because all of these trips, right, at the different lengths and the different categories of cabins, if you're talking around about $900 per person per day, and that includes all gratuities and bar tab, all of your daily activities. So the kayaking, the hiking, being with the National Geographic photographer, being on the Zodiac safaris, having access to the B&H photo locker, having access to our science hubs on the Endurance and the Resolution, everything is included, right? So that $900 per person per day plus your international flights. And then look, from on the Endurance and the Resolution, everything from a category 3 up is a balcony suite. Of 69 cabins, 53 of those are balcony, including all the solos. I will tell you, it's always funny. People say, should I have a balcony or not? They are lovely to have. The wildlife does not know if you're on starboard side or the other, so they're not going to particularly jump out on your side of the ship. And the whole idea with us is that you're with your community up on the bridge. We have an open bridge policy. So be up there with the captain, be out on the front of the ship, be up on the back deck, because that's where you want that conversation and to learn about what you're seeing. So it doesn't matter, whatever cabin you're in, Antarctica just will blow your mind away.
Awesome. And I always like to talk about over-the-top experiences. And I feel like on your ships, the over-the-top would be which particular cabin?
Gosh, well, of course, the category 7, which has the double balcony with the hammock and the table and chairs and the walk-in wardrobe and the rain shower and the bathtub and the double sinks and all the cool stuff. But I will tell you, every cabin has an expeditionary center with an iPad, and all of the maps and everything are uploaded there. There isn't, I think one of the key things with a true expedition is understanding the cabin is that lovely little haven you go back to at the end of the day, right? At the end of a day of exploration where you can lay your head down. But it is not where you want to spend your time in Antarctica. You don't go to Antarctica to sit in your cabin. You go to Antarctica to be off that ship as much as possible. And a true expedition allows you to have this gorgeous platform with great food and wonderful service in a very relaxed manner, no dressy evenings. You don't have to dress up, but so that you can come back to, and most importantly, a safe platform. But the whole idea is that you want to be off that ship and engaged as much as possible. And so, I would say that every room is a delight. It's what's outside that's going to push it over the edge.
Right. And you're going to see just as many animals if you're in an entry-level room versus the top category 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe a trip to Antarctica is the over-the-top experience. It just has variations of it. Right. Oh, goodness. So there's one of those penguin colonies you were mentioning.
Yes, that's South Georgia Island. And those are king penguins. The white and black and yellow ones you see are the adults, and the brown blotches you see, those are all juveniles. Those are all chicks.
So sweet.
Amazing numbers.
And just out of curiosity, how many would be there?
On one of the beaches like this, it's hard to say if this is St. Andrews or Gold Harbor. I can't really tell, but I would say you can look at 100,000 pairs on some of these beaches.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And they're year round. They're not seasonal.
Yeah. So fun. And so let's kind of wrap it up with, would you say, do you have any, other than the sunscreen, other suggestions about like, what should you absolutely bring with you on your trip? Or what are any other things that people might not think about that would be helpful to know from you experienced people?
Multiple hats and multiple pairs of gloves, because inevitably one of each of those will get wet or damp from either snow or rain or just getting out of the zodiac. And if you're going out in the morning and you're going out again in the afternoon, you want to have a dry, warm pair.
And extra socks.
Okay.
Socks, gloves, hats. The one thing I'll tell you, things not to bring. Don't bring high heel shoes. You're not going to need them. You might wear them once. You won't wear them again. Bring comfortable clothing and layers. It's all about layers. Yoga pants are great underneath your dry pants. One of the other things is if you're bringing camera gear and you've bought a new camera, don't come with it in the box and try and figure out how to use it once you're in Antarctica. Take it out, play with it, spend some time. We actually do a special webinar for our guests about Antarctic photography before you go. So make sure you've played with your camera before you bring it down. Bring extra cards so that you've got extra storage. Bring your computer with you if you want to put them onto a secondary storage unit so that you have extra copies. The last thing you want is if you lose your camera or damage your camera that you've lost all these remarkable images, right? So make sure you've got that. Bring extra cords because it's always when you're thousands of miles from home that the cord is going to break on your computer or your camera. So some of the things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, but just to have that little backup of extra cords and batteries and cards for your camera.
Waterproof bag for your camera as well.
Waterproof bag for your camera. Yep.
How often does someone's camera go overboard on a Zodiac?
Not often, but when it does, sometimes we can help them recover it and sometimes we can't, and it's tragic. So it's better to be prepared, because if you're going to shore in a Zodiac, our drivers are very good and we're very careful about keeping people dry. But if it's windy and choppy, that's just going to be the nature of the experience. And sometimes you're getting out into some surf at times, and we can hold things steady. But if your camera is in a waterproof bag and it goes in the drink, it's still okay.
And these are the things that get lost more often over the side. So these should always be in a floaty case or attached to your wrist, because everyone's like, oh, look at that. And then off goes the cell phone. So that's in every destination, but making sure you've got a really good waterproof case for your cell phone is a must.
Absolutely. I like the ones that you wear around your neck that, you can bring boating, and that way you have the double protection of the water bag plus the necklace. Okay. How cute is that elephant seal? And those last seal pictures you just showed, I mean, their faces are so expressive and so human. Like, I look at them, look at that. I mean, it's like, oh, I want to get to know
those are the pups. Their eyes are so big. And this photo is actually taken at a distance. It's zoomed way, way in. Their eyes are so big and so dark. You can see your own reflection in them at a distance. They're unbelievable. They're beautiful.
They are so beautiful. Yeah. Oh, I just love it. Well, so exciting. I think you guys are lucky to have the jobs that you do to be able to go explore these kind of places. I mean, it's just for many of the world who has it on their bucket list, don't leave it to the end. We talked about that before. It's often people's seventh continent, like it would be for me, but you don't have to have it be your seventh continent. It can be the, third or fourth or fifth one. So,
and it will be more than once, Mimi. We have so many people who do Antarctica once and then they have to go back, because it is so different every time you see it. So it shouldn't be looked at as a one time and done, because it steals your heart. It's a little like Africa. You get back and you're like, oh, I've got to do that again. So
And, I think too that the people that you're with on the ships, it attracts a certain kind of traveler, right? So the idea is you might not know the other 150 people on board, but by the end you probably will, and you'll probably like, 99% of them. So the dinner table conversations and the different places they've traveled in the world, I just feel like it would be, a group of people that you could just hang out with, on any trip. So
yeah.
Very like-minded, yes.
Yeah, like-minded, absolutely. And interested, right? Interested in the environment and interested in the wildlife and learning and, growing. So, well, thank you both so much. This has been delightful. I so appreciate your time. And I certainly hope that in the coming year, obviously, we're at the end of the season for this year. So let's hope everything goes smoothly in the way it's going right now. And it'll look like you guys will have a November sailing and have a great, successful year from there.
Thank you. That would be great.
It's been a joy being with you. Thanks, Mimi.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, take care.